Welcome to FPL Selection. Today we'll take a look at how the team is shaping up for game week 34, but first a quick look at how we got on in game week 33. So only 87 points on the free hit, meant a drop down to 350,000. It was an absolute disaster with the Palmer captaincy, and only got one game in 15 minutes total from my 3 Chelsea attackers, which was really disappointing. Otherwise, all my differential picks actually went really well. The likes of Hinshelwood, Ryan, Krupi, and Mateus Nunes all scored double figures. It was just missing out on that extra sort of 10 to 15 points of captaining one of them or Haaland or basically anyone apart from Chelsea attackers. So, yeah, that was the difference between a good and a bad week. I think the top 100,000 is probably out of reach now. I'm about, I think it's 54 points away from that. So to make that up is going to be quite difficult in 5 weeks. But I'm just going to try and throw out a few differentials, riskier captains, see if I can make that up. I've got a couple of mini leagues as well that I'd like to win. I've got a sort of similar gap to the leader. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame really the free hit didn't work out. Probably should have just got Haaland and captained him and not try to be too differential. But, in hindsight, it's obviously easy to say that. So yeah, I feel a little bit unlucky, but that's the risk you take when you go against sort of a high owned captain. So looking ahead now to game week 34, I've got one free transfer in the bank. I'm pretty keen to roll this week, as I should have 11 starters in my squad. Obviously pending any injury news in the press conferences. I think I've got a decent balance of popular players and a few differentials. So yeah, I want to sort of save up this transfers and hopefully next week we'll know which teams are going to be doubling before the end of the season. I think, Man City obviously should double. Palace are quite likely to double. But there's also a scenario where Bournemouth might even have a double. So yeah, hopefully that'll get cleared up and having the 2 free transfers will be nice so I can, potentially attack a few of the fixtures for those teams and see if we can make up a little bit of ground with those. So looking at the team for this week, Raya is at home to Newcastle, and I've got Gabriel for the double Arsenal defence. Obviously, they'll be disappointed Arsenal to lose to City, but they're still level on points, so it's only going to take one slip up from City, and if they win all their games, they're going to win the league. So yeah, I think they're going to be obviously highly motivated, and we know how good they are at home defensively. So that was the reason I got Raya in to double up on them and sort of back their fixtures for the rest of the season to be a few clean sheets. I think Newcastle obviously on a real negative at the moment, not scoring many goals, poor results. I know they're always going to get motivated to play against a good team like Arsenal, but it is hard to see them, breaking through when they're just not in form, especially if Gordon doesn't make it for the game as well. So yeah, quietly confident here that good chance for double clean sheet there. And Van Dijk is at home to Palace. Very hit and miss, the Liverpool defence. They had a good moment in the season, sort of in the middle of the season, where they were one of the better defences. But they've been conceding a lot of goals. But Van Dijk's just such a threat at set pieces. Got his goal last week. He's been decent for DEFCON. So, yeah, very happy to own him. I think he's going to be quite popular on the free hit this week as well. So, yeah, it's a home fixture. Palace potentially distracted by the Conference League. So, yeah, be hoping for at least something from Van Dijk anyway. And Diouf is at home to Everton. West Ham really tightened up now under Nuno. It's, quite a few clean sheets they've had now. I think Mavropanos would be the one you'd want to own, obviously with the attacking threat. But, Diouf does tend to put in plenty of crosses and we have seen him get a few assists this season. So I think they're still fighting for their lives. Everton, trying to push for Europe. So should be a competitive game. I know they've been decent away from home as well, Everton. So certainly no gimme here for West Ham to get a clean sheet. But yeah, definitely happy to have one of their defence anyway. And yeah, we know how Nuno can work sometimes. They can really lock it down. So yeah, good chance for a clean sheet there, I think. Then Alderete is at home to Forest. And I've got Mukiele for the double Sunderland defence. Obviously, Sunderland not quite the defence that they were earlier in the season. I've had these two sitting on my bench for a long time now. Mukiele's been great for attack and returns as well this season, and they've both been fairly decent for defcons. So, a home game against Forest. Obviously Forest are fighting for their lives as well, so it's going to be a tricky game. But yeah, I'm just sort of hoping that Sunderland can, get back to where they were a little bit earlier in the season with their defence at home and try and see out the season as high as they can in the league. And they've even got an outside shot of getting a European place as well. So yeah, there's all to play for there, and hopefully a bit of defcon and attack and return might be on the cards as well. So moving on to the midfield, Rodgers is away to Fulham. Finally getting some use out of Rodgers again. He's been sitting on the bench for quite a few weeks. Missed a few points as well from him recently. It's nice to see him getting a few returns, and hopefully he'll continue that when I actually need him. Away at Fulham potentially on the beach now. I think they could squeeze into European places, but maybe not so high a chance as some of the other teams. But Villa are certainly, playing a little bit better at the moment, and they're obviously trying to hold on to their Champions League place. So, yeah, I'd be looking for Rodgers to get something here on the counter and, keep up their good run, try and hold on to their Champions League place. And then Bumo is at home to Brentford, and I've got Fernandes for the double United attack. I think, there's a very dodgy fixture for United. Brentford can be a tricky team to play against. And any team that, isn't going to hold on to a lot of possession against United is generally a tricky team, as we do still prefer to play sort of on the counter-attack. I think, obviously, Fernandes is probably the best asset in the game at the moment. So, any game he can get you points. So it's obviously, there's always going to be chances in the game for the likes of Mbumo. But a question of whether he's even going to start this game, that's probably still up in the air. Been, carrying a little bit of an injury, is what I understand. So, I mean, in a perfect world, I'd have more transfers and I'd probably move him on at this point, to be honest, because he's been quite disappointing since I've owned him, I think 5 or 6 game weeks. But for potentially one more week, home game against Brentford, you'd be hoping to get something from him against his former club as well. I just hope he plays on the right wing, because I think he's a lot more effective when he does play out there. But I think that's, obviously whether Ahmad starts or he does is the question there. I think Fernandes is probably the best captain again this week, but yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to go with him as captain. I'll explain a bit later, but I'm obviously looking for differentials. But I think if you're playing safe and sensible, Fernandes is probably the best captain. Home game, just very consistent. Moving on to the forwards, Thiago is away at United. As I said, I think this is, potentially a good game for Brentford. They're not going to, want to dominate the ball. They're going to try and play on the counter. United can be got at, definitely, especially if we haven't got our first choice defence with a few injuries. He scored 2 goals against us earlier in the season, so in good form at the moment. He's obviously still playing for his place at the World Cup. So, yeah, wouldn't be surprised to see at least one return from Thiago here. And Solanke is away to Wolves. Wolves obviously being relegated now. They look like they've sort of not given up as such, but they're not, really putting up the fight that they were a few weeks ago. So conceding quite a few goals now. Spurs played a lot better last week against Brighton. Solanke looked very good in that game as well. Maybe didn't get so many of the chances come his way, but he was certainly working hard for the team, and Spurs did look a decent threat. So I definitely back De Zerbi to improve them. He's had another week to work with them. The quality of the squad there should be getting a bit more out of them attacking wise, and I think away at Wolves should be a nice fixture for them to dominate the ball and hopefully score a few goals and potentially get themselves out of the relegation zone. So I'm hoping Solanke becomes the talisman for that team. There's always potential in a De Zerbi team for goals, so hopefully this is going to be the game. And I think I'm going to captain Solanke this week. I think the fixtures there, we've obviously got a lot to play for. As I said, De Zerbi's the coach. Likes to play attacking football. He'll want them to score plenty of goals. So I'm just hoping all of that comes together, and obviously very low owned at the moment as well. Try and get a bit of a jump in rank. So in summary, I think Fernandes is the best captain this week. But as I said, I'm trying to make up the ground, so I think Solanke is going to be my captain. With a good fixture, the extra week, on the training ground with De Zerbi, I think there's going to be some goals for Spurs, and that's why I brought him in the other week. So, yeah, just sort of going to take that gamble and hopefully can make up some ground. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.